Thinking Aloud. Conversations on the leading edge of knowledge and discovery with psychologist Jeffrey Mishlove.
What I do is I decide to permit my logical brain to free associate, to make enough sense out of something so that when I present this information to a client, I'm not saying, oh, orange, squiggly, feels tall. Do you know what that is? And they're looking at me like, I paid for this? You have to somewhere put together information in a cohesive way, not to say that I accept my interpretation. Ultimately, it's the client.
Well, there's a world of difference, I think, between doing remote viewing using that specific protocol for the purposes that remote viewers use it, and doing a reading for a client who is either with you on the telephone or in front of you physically. Right.
Well, that's why my system is different.
Yeah.
And most psychics, when they're doing a reading, it's right there.
Mm-hmm.
And it happens while they're talking. There's no recording of it unless somebody's recording it. But by then, what I'm doing is I ask the client for, what I say every time, any relevant questions and or photos. Sometimes they'll send me questions only. Sometimes they'll be a little bit more descriptive.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes not at all.
Yeah.
Sometimes a photo, maybe with a name, maybe not.
Mm-hmm.
From there, I do what I call an advanced reading. And I usually spend twice as much time doing my advanced reading, which is all written,
mm-hmm.
before I ever talk to the client.
Ah.
And so when I'm talking to the client, I'm verifying
mm-hmm.
every single bit of data,
mm-hmm.
or trying to, as
mm-hmm.
much as I can.
Mm-hmm. So feedback becomes very important.
Feedback is key, but that's what Ingo Swann always said.
Yeah.
Feedback is key. You've got to get feedback if you're ever going to know whether your method is correct.
That's, in fact, that's the essence of the scientific method right there. You form a hypothesis and you test your hypothesis against feedback from the physical world.
Right. And it does one other thing, and that is it prevents somebody from saying, oh, it was just a cold reading. You could pick up the micro muscle movements, or you got little clues from the whatever.
Mm-hmm.
It prevents that. It's purely, as I said, with that tiny bit of front loading where they ask a question, as opposed to, say, CRV, where you're just getting, or ARV, you're just getting a number.
Different types of remote viewing.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So now what that does for me is, in this giant matrix of potential information, it gives me a beacon. That the question is the beacon. It takes me to a different space-time location, wherever
mm-hmm.
that is, and I then am on what Ingo might have called, this signal pathway,
mm-hmm.
where I'm trying, or I'm not trying, I am picking up whatever crazy information is coming along that I can't make sense of. I'm writing it all down,
mm-hmm. and
then I'm checking with the client. So when they say, oh yeah, that means this or that means that,
mm-hmm.
great. But I then use that as a kind of support for any messaging that I'm giving them afterwards. In other words, if I'm on the signal track on whatever the items are, then I know that what I'm telling them, the probability is that I'm correct. I don't know for sure.
When you say when you're on the signal track, I like that phrase. Is it something that you intuit it right there in the moment?
Yeah, it takes a huge amount of concentration, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
Most people don't realize that, or at least for me it does. And maybe, mm-hmm. I'm not what you might call a natural psychic. I mean, as far as I know, I wasn't born with it. I learned it. So for me, to get information, you have to stay totally focused mm-hmm. on that beacon
mm-hmm.
for as long as you can,
mm-hmm.
which means for me, no interruptions, no music, no noise, Nothing, because anything, I become extremely sensitive, because any sensory bit that enters in can potentially be data. So I'm very careful about that.